All right, thank you for coming. Why have we got you here? We obviously have some key messages that we want to deliver to you and to our community. The Wilton New Town has the potential to deliver positive outcomes for our Shire and our future communities, if well planned. It is a unique opportunity to plan a great new community, but we're increasingly concerned that there needs to be a more coordinated approach by all levels of government, all relevant government agencies and all development bodies. If this doesn't occur, our worry is that we will get a Wilton New Town that is not right, and our future generations will have to deal with the consequences of poor infrastructure and public transport, limited employment, lack of public education and access to local health services. We do know people are actually taking time getting here this morning because one little crisis means that the whole system comes to a halt. Why are we here and why are we advocating? Obviously, we have a proposal of a huge new town, a new town that has not yet finalised critical infrastructure for a population which could reach over 50,000. The delivery plans need to be clear and we need to have a clear staging for public transport, health and education infrastructure. This approach runs the risk of leaving a legacy of social disadvantage and limited future prosperity. We only need to have a look today at today's paper, interestingly enough. We've got the Project Sydney happening, and if I want to quote some people out of that, they talk about the fact that a lack of jobs close to home and poor transport links means people in these areas can spend an average of 3 hours commuting, or an equivalent of 20 working weeks each year. Now that's talking about areas that are closer to their jobs than what we're even proposing here. So how can we rob people of 20 working weeks every year? Which brings us around to we're going to put up a different slide here. We're going to tell a story today, and the story is about the D'Souza family. This is not just a snapshot of our story about Wilton. This is about this family. So this is not about council, this is not about government, this is about families and why we want to advocate for our community into the future. We talk about two scenarios for this family, one in a not so great town and one in an absolutely fantastic great new town. In a not so great town, we've got David and Marie here over there. They have long commutes. They have experience higher living expenses since moving to Wilton, and they feel socially isolated. Jessica, their daughter in the middle, is David's daughter from a previous marriage, and she leaves uni due to the fact that transport is just so poor to get there. And she has trouble finding a job and she feels directionless. Jack, who's in the background there, he can't ride to school because there's no safety link over Picton Road. He's very bright and he's keen to go to a selective high school, but that would mean travelling over an hour each way for him. Audrey attends daycare. This is Audrey on the end, the really cute one. And she attends daycare 2 days a week and she's on the waiting list for other days. She's on the autism spectrum and she needs more support, but she can't get that unless she's at daycare. So this family, and not only this family, they have grandparents that live at Tarmore that try and help the parents who can't get to soccer training or can't get the children to appointments. But to get from Tarmore to Wilton New Town for these elderly people is also an issue. But you know what? In a great new town, David works from home, NBN hopefully, or uses the local business hub. Marie finds a close job to home, and they save money on travel costs and they can work from home, and they have a whole lot of activities that are close, social activities. Jessica there, she enjoys going to uni because she's got an express bus from Wilton down to Wollongong, or maybe even a train. She's got a part-time job at the town centre and her friends can all come round and go out to cafes of an evening. Jack can ride his bike to school due to the pedestrian bridge on Picton Road, and he takes himself off to footy training after school on the shared pathways. And you know what? Even Dad's at home and Dad can go to footy training and watch him. He's not stuck on a road somewhere. Jack's attending the orientation at the high school at Wilton, and hopefully he'll make his choice of what high school he goes to soon. Audrey has daycare available 5 days a week, and she has a special needs teacher assisting her with her integration. She'll be able to attend the mainstream primary school next year due to the early intervention program. The grandparents from Tamworth, they're able to catch public transport there. And you know what? They're even thinking maybe they need to downsize. And because there's such great health services at Wilton, maybe they think they'll move a little closer to the rest of their family into a house and be able to access health services and help out with the children. So this is the difference between a great town and a not so great town. We want to talk about some other points, obviously. So planning for growth on the fringe of Sydney must overcome several significant challenges. And without strong advocacy for good urban design and infrastructure delivery, Wilton New Town will compound problems that Western Sydney communities already face. In fact, because its separation and distance from Sydney's metropolitan area, problems such as high car dependency, poor health, lower education, high employment and social exclusion are heightened. We only have to look today. We've just had some bad weather, we've had a couple of accidents around, and people are now running over an hour late for their appointments. We want to talk about, is this a solution to affordable housing? We've seen government at the moment, both state and federal, talk about the lack of housing and the need for affordable housing. It is a significant issue for the people of Western Sydney. However, the response to this issue at this point appears to be solely focused on increasing housing supply, irrespective of whether there is insufficient infrastructure to support the new housing. The common response is that development has to be at no additional cost to government. But that's a false economy, as lack of investment in schools, hospital and public transport infrastructure only creates poorly connected, socially disadvantaged and unhealthier communities, the cost of all which will be borne elsewhere by government through greater welfare dependency and the public health system. Why and what are we advocating for? We believe that any release of land for rezoning in Wilton needs the state government to resolve many of the outstanding issues. We need integrated healthcare facilities, providing services from health clinics, wellbeing centres and specialist centres. We're talking about a new town the size of Port Macquarie, and we can't be expected to rely on the health and medical services in distant townships, such as Campbelltown, which is approximately 30 kilometres away, and Liverpool, which is over 50. We need a provision of rail transport services. We not only need electrification of our rail, but we need the Meldon-Dumbarton rail corridor. To build a town with an eventual population of 50,000 plus on the rural fringe of Sydney and expect people to commute over 1 hour to work, and it's sometimes up to 3 hours to work, and school is unacceptable. We are asking the state government to plan for timely delivery of electrified passenger rail transport through to Picton and a new train station at Wilton New Town. This supports the federal government's initiative of a 30-minute city. The 30-minute city, we were talking about this the other night, it's an Italian concept where people can access employment services and recreational services within 30 minutes of where they live. And people who do not have that ability, they classify it as a social deficit. So the other thing that we need is another public primary and health high school. Currently we have local children travelling approximately to 17 different high schools outside our shire. Everybody has to realise that's unacceptable, and it disadvantages the learning and development of our young people. It is a concern that the state government is expecting to double our population over the next 30 years without providing a clear commitment in regards to investing in the education of our young people. We need the New South Wales Government to commit to timely delivery of a K-12 public school in Wilton, as the only public high school in Wallandilly is already over capacity. I just note we had a paper that came out with this Sydney project, and if I can quote Minister Rob Stokes, he said, if your kids are getting a good education, access to good health, and they can move around the community on good roads and rail, well then you're doing your bit as government. So I'd like to hold them to that. I also note that there's a quote from the Premier, and it says, we can't stop growing whether we like it or not, but I think the biggest challenge for me as a state leader is how you do deal with that growth and bring the community along with you so that the community embraces than rather fears it. It is my job to say to everybody, and this is her quote, yes, we're growing, but as a government, we're doing it responsibly. We're doing it with all the infrastructure we need, unlike the past where things just grew without schools and hospitals. So that's telling you exactly what we need in this new town. We need an access to a range of local jobs. As part of the land use and infrastructure strategy, the state government needs to identify an appropriate employment target to ensure that land is only released when an appropriate number of jobs are created. As it is at this moment, approximately 2/3 of Wallandilly's employed residents travel outside the LGA to work, and this is unsustainable, and that's now. That's not with a whole extra city happening on our border. It has direct impact on the physical and emotional well-being of our residents and their ability to contribute to our local community. We can't have the dads like Mr. D'Souza going and helping. He can't be the coach of the local football team or cricket team. Mum can't go to the canteen because they're all travelling so far to work. Housing choices needs to ensure that there is an affordable option for all people at all various stages of their lives, from the first home buyers through to the seniors and retirees. Like I said, the grandparents, they need to have some option as well. And these need to be connected by cycleways, pedestrian linkages to local shops and recreational facilities. Well, we should have another slide up here now. And this is called Everybody Working Together, and this is the most important. To date, we've seen times when we've all been together. We've also seen a fragmented approach to the development of Wilton and a lack of coordination. And that's what is the great concern at the moment to the council. So we are advocating for a coordinated approach by all levels of government to align infrastructure, investment with housing delivery. They have done this before, and I've seen there's some articles out there where they've actually led by example. So certainly we've had rail line go into Leppington, and we've had rail lines go elsewhere before there's been a huge number of houses there. Interestingly enough, 2 days ago, as you can see, I managed to meet with the Premier. I talked to her about the fact that we're being asked as a council to take on the risk of allowing just a portion of this development to go ahead without infrastructure. She said to me, you shouldn't have to take that risk. I then talked to her about the fact that we need this infrastructure to deliver this fantastic town. She agreed with me. She took the advocacy paper that we're releasing today and was quite happy to have her photograph taken with it. So the Premier understands what we're saying. She said, what a great document. So we also have federal government working on the Western Sydney City deals at the moment, and our council, along with 7 other councils and the state and federal governments, are working on the Western Sydney City deals. Minister Angus Taylor has identified the need for the city deals to unlock potentially 180,000 lots for residential developments across those 8 different council areas. Wilton New Town will potentially assist in achieving this goal, but it needs to be supported by the appropriate infrastructure investment to unlock that growth. We have the opportunity to have an exemplar, I think our General Manager manager calls it an absolutely exemplar of a town. It can be magnificent. It can be a millennium, an example for everybody else. We've been and looked at other towns that have been developed. We want our new town to be the town people are coming to look at to see what can be done and delivered. To make sure Wilton New Town is a great town, we're going to be inviting the Premier, the Minister, federal and state members, as well as the Department of Planning and Environment and key developers to meet with us and listen to our vision for a well-planned community so that we can all work together to create a great town for Wilton. It can be amazing. Wilton has the potential to deliver a positive outcome for all of our shire. Our shire that at this moment already has its own issues, but we're willing to accept some of those because we are rural, but we're not willing to accept more population and another town without we increase that infrastructure. We want it to be great for our future communities, and we want to make sure this happens. So our message, and I have Councillor Banasic with me and I have Councillor Briggs with me, our message to everyone out there is that we're going to have a great new town or no town at all. Thank you very much.
What's been the biggest hold up, I guess? So like, why did you decide to hold this meeting, and like, what's prompted this? What's been the difficulty?
So originally, everybody seemed to be working together. Obviously, it's an interesting position there. It's actually a very pivotal position if you think about it. It's halfway between Sydney and Canberra, and it's obviously the link down to the Illawarra, so we do appreciate that position is a very special position. And originally when this was being worked through, we had everybody working together, and it's gone along through a process, but now all of a sudden we seem to have people, there were issues where people were doing their own thing. That seemed to get solved a little bit, but council feels that it's under pressure to accept some of those portions before we actually get the infrastructure promised. And the worry is if we actually accept some of those houses, and that's not the critical number to deliver infrastructure in the long run, we don't want to run the risk of having another 3,000 plus people out there still without infrastructure. We know we've got to have a critical number to get what we need, but just delivering another 3,500 or whatever it is people out there and no surety that we're going to get the infrastructure, we're just not going to do that. It's just not the right thing for us. We want the infrastructure. We want it to be a great town. We don't want either a smaller town with no infrastructure. We want the whole package. We want it to be brilliant.
So how closely are the proponents on board with this? So obviously you said they weren't working together, now they are. So are you just relying on the state government to provide the infrastructure, or do they have to provide infrastructure as well?
So at the moment there's a report called the Lewis report that we're waiting on, which will talk about land use, and I think that will give us some information about where we're going. That is on somebody's desk at the moment, and apparently it's getting very close to being released. But there is also the pressure to release a portion before that land use study becomes available. And really what we'd like to see is it just held up just for a couple of months, get the land use study done, and let's release the entirety with the promises of the critical numbers, of the critical staging of when all that infrastructure is going to happen. I think that's just the appropriate thing to do. As the Premier said, we shouldn't have to take a risk. And we can help them. They're after housing at the moment. We can help them. But we're going to have great housing, not just a bad town. We're going to have a great town.
We talked about a workshop. We've seen the mistakes that have happened at Camden and Campbelltown. That's not knocking those councils, but we just don't want another Narellan Road in Wollondilly. If they're going to want this development, they've got to not just provide the corridor. I was at a road summit on Monday, and this issue came up, same in other council areas, where the government saying, "I will provide the corridor." Okay, they provided that corridor with Narellan Road. Look what's happening every day. We don't want that to happen to our residents. Okay, Otherwise, they won't be able to commute to Wollongong or get to the city. The infrastructure needs to be done now, not tomorrow. So I'm sure Councillor Briggs and I support the Mayor totally. There's no division on council on this. We want it, and just to back up what the Mayor says, I think he's probably been too kind. The developers have got to work together, and they've got to be upfront with us. We've sadly seen in the past promises of golf courses and other things that have not been delivered. And even at 5 minutes to midnight, we get talk of 20-storey buildings. The developers have got to be upfront, work together. Otherwise, if everybody's not working together, as the Mayor said, it means no town at all.
Councillor Briggs, do you want to say something?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Really, I want to reiterate what Councillor Banasic has said, and that is the council is united in our aim to end up with an inspirational build in Wilton New Town that is an aspirational destination for all families that wish to come there. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to get it right, and we feel the weight of that responsibility, but we have a good team of very, very capable people around us, the executive of council, and all that support there. So this is that opportunity. It's upon us now, and it's incumbent upon us to get it right. Thank you.
So another question, Ashley? No?
Yeah. If you don't get the support and the commitments that you are hoping for, will you withdraw your support from?
I think it's getting to that point, Ashley. I don't think we'll get there. I think we'll be able to see the opportunities, and I'm sure with Department of Planning and the developers and the government, I think if we all use a bit of common sense, I think we can get something that will suit all of us. You know, really, if we get a great town and we get this infrastructure, we'll get some housing for state and federal government. That'll help the Department of Planning. We'll get some great areas that the developers will be able to sell and, develop and go out there with great facilities. It'll be brilliant. And we will get a great town for our community of the future. And I think what Councillor Briggs just said, that's another important thing. You need to know that advocacy paper was voted on unanimously and that every single councillor is on the same page. We had a meeting the other evening with the Department of Planning and everybody is saying the same thing. A great new town or no town at all.
What do you expect will be the next step after this meeting?
I expect that we'll be actually having some meetings. I did speak to the Premier the other day. I do know that the Department of Planning will continue to work with our staff, and I do know the developers will continue to work with our staff. It's been a consistent message. Council have been saying it for quite a while. I think that we're not sure that we were being heard exactly, and that's why this advocacy paper's out there. It's just another story to make sure everybody realises a united council is saying that one message, a great new town or no town at all. So I think it's probably gone also beyond, it probably needs some political influence, which is why when I had the opportunity to speak to the Premier, this was the main issue that I spoke about. We're certainly open for anybody to give us a call at any point in time, when we'll keep advocating. You've got a copy of the advocacy paper. As you see, our Premier is holding it up there proudly for you all to see, and you don't need to read it all. It's not a policy paper. It's just a really good story about how we can have an amazing town out there. And as I said, there surely will be things, we will develop policy papers. We'll probably, put a lot more work into what we present to ministers, but certainly we're not on the warpath. We're on an advocacy to go out there and work together to deliver this great new town. Thank you. Thank you.